Welcome. It's awesome to be back together. I have a big challenge today to fill Lyosha's shoes. He's been doing an amazing job. Pastor Alexei has been doing an amazing job with these family nights. And this month, I am jumping in. And our goal with these evenings is for us to take on a topic that is really relevant to family life, whether you're a newlywed couple, whether you're a retired couple, whether you're a couple with a lot of kids, whether you're a single parent, issues related to our homes and our life in the home. So this evening, obviously, we're talking about technology because that's the topic we're covering this month. And what I want to encourage you guys, as I'm sharing some of the thoughts that I've got prepared, just think about things that you can contribute, because to me, that's also one of the most important parts, one of the most interesting parts, beneficial parts of these evenings is the comments that you can share, the questions that you can ask, and the questions not just for me, because it's a time for us to discuss together as a church. And I think when we're talking about wisdom, and we're in the first sermon on technology, we're talking about how, we're all in the pursuit of wisdom. It's one of the kind of main purposes in our spiritual formation. One of the ways that we gather wisdom together is as the community of the church, as the body of Christ. We come together, we share all the ways that God has been teaching us and shaping us through our experiences, through our desire to apply the truth. So that's what makes these evenings so rich, not just the teaching, but the wisdom we can share and discuss. So, technology and our family. So much that we can discuss here. My goal is to hit on some core principles that hopefully get your mind going in the right direction. Before we start off, I wanted to just share some statistics. The average kid spends 5 hours a day on a device. That's in America. So hopefully our kids are not that average, but maybe some of our kids are in that average. What is stressing parents out these days? Well, the biggest thing that makes parents think that today, parenting is more difficult than it used to be. Of course, we all like to think that we're the generation that has it harder than the rest. Maybe that's the selfishness, but it seems to be an agreement across the platform, right, for all of us parents, that technology is something that makes parenting challenging in a new way, in a way that we couldn't ask our parents maybe, because things are changing so fast and becoming so complex. So this is one of the big topics that's, on the mind of all of us. Next slide. This is really interesting. This is a question asking parents, do you set any limits on how much TV your kids can watch daily? And between different generations, the answers are slightly different. But generally speaking, you can say, oh, wow, majority of parents say yes. But look at that, 41% say no. That's a huge percentage. How many households in the U.S., how many Christian households have no limit on how much TV you can watch? And I think it's a particularly, I don't know how it is, in Russia or in Europe, but I know it's in our American culture here that we've grown in the last 30 years. TV is a huge part of life. And that's something that we need to think very carefully about, because that's very, very formative. It shapes us in many ways. So the first thing that I wanted to throw out there as a principle for our family life is, before you dive into the question of technology, you have to ask this question when you think about life under your roof. What is the purpose or mission of life in your home? Do you even think about that? Do you think of life in your home as something that has a distinct direction, a distinct purpose? Or is it just the place we all congregate, eat, and sleep? Because the most powerful thing that determines all the outcomes is how you set the goal, right? Home is, whether you realize it or not, home is the most powerful and formative place in every person's life. So in the life of your kids, there's nothing going to be that's more powerful and that will form their habits, their character, than home. That is the most powerful thing. Now, the question is, the way we structure life under our roof, is it intentional? Do we think, as a family, why do we exist? As a family, what are our goals? And do we think out loud about these things? Is it obvious to my kids why we exist as a family? Paul gives us these words in Ephesians 6, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord because this is right. Honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may have a long life in the land. Fathers, do not stir up anger in your children, but bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord." It's interesting here that Paul is pulling on this thread that spans through all of Scripture. He's quoting to us Old Testament, like the covenant law that God gave to Israel, as the foundation. He's pulling that into the New Testament home, and he's saying to the children, are you formed by what the Lord says to honor your parents? And then to the parents, are you raising your kids, especially fathers, he says, right, in the discipline and instruction of the Lord? Are my kids formed in a direction? Is there a goal? That's a huge question. It should be, for us Christians, that the goal of life under our roof is that this is a place where people are shaped to be disciples of Christ, to live wisely and powerfully in the world. We are training souls, human beings, to go out in the world and live powerfully. We are forming them for a good life. One of the things that has gripped me, kind of my imagination, studying early church history, is the concept of a monastery. I've never really thought about the significance, but when the earliest monasteries started, the idea was to retreat from the washed-down, chaotic Christianity that was in the empire during the early 400s. And these guys were saying, we want to live together intentionally. So these monasteries would form. They were communities, and there was rules, and there was a purpose, and there was an order of life. And they worked together. They went to the fields. They harvested. They sang their psalms in the beginning. But like the whole arc of the day, it was formed under this unified vision. We live in this community for the purpose of our spiritual formation, even though we're all doing all the ordinary, everyday things. And that idea that we live together with an intentional purpose, that should be an idea that Christian homes are filled with. Christian homes, I think, should be like mini monasteries, and not in the sense that we're all running away from the world and memorizing the Bible all the time, but in the sense that it is a place where your kids feel like there is a direction here, there is a purpose. When we have that clear goal, when it comes to setting rules, talking about technology, setting lines and borders and explain, then your kids have an understanding, this is the goal of everything. This is why we can't watch TV for 10 hours a day. This is why we can't do all these other things. So this is something that I want to get us thinking about. I love how Justin Whitmell Early says this in the next slide. Screens are incredibly formative because they convey stories and images that captivate our imagination. This doesn't make them bad. It makes them powerful. And the power can be for good or bad. But the fact is, for both us parents and our children, we will either form our screen habits or our screen habits will form us. There is no alternative. This is a fight over who forms who. It's a really great line from one of the books back there, Habits of the Household. I really recommend that book. It's a very, very wonderful book. Very easy, quick read, but lots of wisdom there. So, point number 2. Healthy approaches to technology require a healthy and thoughtful approach to life. So what I'm trying to say here is, when we're talking about technology, what I'm challenging all of us, that this would be a time where we really grab onto this stuff. That just because we listen to a few sermons and then we just go back to our lives doesn't mean things will change. For change to happen in your life, especially in something so ingrained in your daily routine as the screen, you need to actively stop and think about it. So that's what I simply want to challenge. Your home, especially if you are a parent with kids, you have to think intentionally, okay, what is this that we are doing? How are we doing it? There are no shortcuts here. Some of the things that I'm sharing today are like trying to apply biblical principles. Some of it are my best opinion on something. And that's where we can push back and we can have a conversation, we can talk and we can think. But at the end of the day, your kids will not just do what your rules are. Your kids will do what you do. Your kids will be what you are, right? So that's why we have to think deeply and we have to internalize some of this stuff. Yeah, great. Next slide. Number 3. All right, so when we're thinking about life in the home, one place that I really want to start is thinking intentionally about how my home is structured. Andy Crouch talks about this in his book, the little orange book called The Tech-Wise Family. Also, just an awesome little book. It's like a 2-hour read if you just sit down and read it. So it's not long. And a lot of the stats I'm pulling from his book. But he says this thing. He says, your home, it promotes something, right? Your home, the way it's structured, even the way the furniture is arranged, it's promoting something, right? Our behavior as human beings, we're incarnate creatures, we're bodily creatures. We're shaped by our environment. And that means that generally how your environment is structured, that's how you will start to live. So there's this thing called a nudge. Has anybody ever heard of a nudge? A nudge is not just like nudging somebody, but in behavioral, in the behavioral world, a nudge is it's an intervention that gently steers individuals towards a desired action. What does that mean? When you place a huge TV in the center of your living room and you just have one giant straight couch facing the TV, that's a nudge. That's making it more difficult in your living room to sit and have a conversation in a circle and making it much easier to sit and face the TV and turn it on, right? So that is an environmental structure that is created that is promoting behavior in a certain direction. If we want to promote healthy habits in our homes, you have to think about your home and you have to think, what does my home promote? If I want my kids to grow up in healthy conversations, to be creative, to be reading books, to be doing all this stuff, well, then the question is, does your home look like it's a place where that stuff is easier to do than it is to watch TV or play video games, right? If there's an iPad on the couch, and if there's an iPad in the room, and if there's a TV there, and a TV there, and a TV and remotes laying everywhere, it makes it almost impossible not to sit down and swipe the screen and start going, right? We're creating an atmosphere. And as those who carve our homes, even if you don't have kids, you have to think, what kind of home is this? Is this a home where people can gather, have conversations, share life? Or is this a home where we're thrown back and forth by our daily crazy schedules and we sit in front of the TV and we're not promoting a lifestyle that is leading us to deeper and healthier habits? So again, Andy Crouch talks about this a lot, but that it starts when we talk about our technology habits. It starts about, like right now in our rental, it's a small living room and we have this big couch, and it's really frustrating because it's not as in our other house. We had a whole living room that had no TV, a separate entry living room, and I think personally if you can have a living area, a main living room where there's no TV, and a lot of people already do that, that's awesome because it creates, the TV is this big giant thing staring at you, right? And even when you're talking, it's just this big black box. Another really cool solution is that there's a TV that you can buy, which is really expensive, but it's a TV that kind of masquerades as a painting. Samsung, I think Samsung has it. I think they're the only ones who make it. And so it's the texture of the screen. You can turn it on, and you can pick various paintings. And so when it's hanging there, it just looks like a painting. And you can pick various art forms, and so you can't even tell it's a TV until you come up and you there's a remote or whatever. So these are different ways that you think intentionally about, okay, if there's a TV in my home, or maybe there shouldn't be a TV, maybe there should be a little pull-down screen and a projector, then it takes me 3 steps before we can sit and watch cartoons or whatever. I have to pull down the projector screen, I have to put the projector, I have to turn it on. All those steps, those are all nudges. Those are all nudges that make it more difficult for my kids to be engaging in watching TV and making it easier for whatever is there, right? If you have a kid's room that is just totally, everything's a mess and everything's mixed up, all the toys are mixed up, it's not promoting your kids to go in there and play, right? If we buy quality toys that get their brains going and they're organized, your kid will want to go and play. So this is thinking intentionally about nudging life in our homes toward conversation, toward creativity, toward spending time together and building relationships. Number 4. So when we're talking about technology, I think one thing that I want to do is kind of come out of the gates swinging a little bit, because I think that in our church there's some variety. I don't know how what kind of rules we all set, and that's something that we can all talk about. But I think that it's really important about technology to just establish some basics, right, that we all kind of agree on, and that are just known facts. We cannot be naive about the danger and the power that an iPhone or an iPad has, or a laptop in the kid's bedroom has, to the kid and their soul. And when it comes down to the danger and the power, there's a couple of things that we want to highlight. First of all, the danger of addiction, the very real reality of addiction. If you read about technology right now, it's like World Health Organization and like the what is the American Health Organization called? Whatever it is. Like among the health professionals, there is this big concern. Like they're really worried about teenagers and mental health. What we see with teenagers today, displaying depression, suicidal stuff, anxiety, panic attacks, it's very messed up. Like we've never seen teenagers behaving this way. And part of it is technology is addicting. It literally addicting just like a drug is addicting, because it rewires your brain in ways that the way, for example, social media is designed. If you don't know, social media is designed, like Instagram, TikTok, they are designed to feed bursts of affirmation. And when a person gets those likes, they are getting dopamine rushes in their brain. Dopamine is a drug that your brain produces. It's a pleasure drug. And your brain becomes more and more addicted to, I want more of this affirmation. It actually is an addiction. When it comes to video games, there is a serious thing called like video game addiction syndrome right now, that like a lot of young men in college it's an issue. Like they are literally addicted to video games, and they're having a hard time. Like something's wrong with my brain. Like I can't leave. This is so captivating. Why? Because the video games are designed that way. Very smart people are thinking about making the game so that you never want to leave. That is how it's designed. Millions of dollars are going into that. The video game industry is bigger than Hollywood and the music industry combined. That's how big. There's billions of dollars in video games. There's more money in video games than there are in all the movies put together and all the music put together. It's huge. That's why they're addicting, because they're created very powerfully. Entertainment, it's getting better and better, more and more interesting. You just keep clicking. So addiction is very real. Your kids can get addicted to technology. It's real. It's not just not going to happen. If they have a device in front of them, if they have a Netflix, if they have Instagram, TikTok, if they have video games on there, and if there's no restriction, they will be addicted to the screen. That's a fact, right? The next thing in terms of exposure to harmful content, like we all have to be 100% clear, right, that porn industry is bigger than ever. Sex trafficking today is like, it's modern slavery, and it's bigger than ever. It's more powerful than ever. And the pornography websites are created to capture accidental arrivals. So a lot of the URLs on the porn sites are designed, so like if a kid is going to like Disney.com, and if they misspell Disney and they accidentally land where? So a lot of the porn sites are created to capture those misspelled kids' websites so that kids land into these. This is intentional. It's purposeful, right? It's evil. It's the deep evil in our world, and it's coming through the screen. Pornography addiction is like bigger than ever. Boys between ages 8 and 12 is the average of being exposed, and the pornography of today is not the pornography of 20 years ago. It's way more way more addicting, and way more. You have, for the first time in any time in history, you have young men who are getting married who are struggling with sexual intimacy because they are not able to have sex with a real person because their brain, it's physical. Their brain has been rewired by pornography. It's like this is real, and it's everywhere, okay? Many kids discover pornography not from their own devices, but from friends, from other kids. So at school, kids in schools who have iPhones, it doesn't matter if your kid doesn't have an iPhone, it's the kids that they're around them, right? 60% of teenagers in the US report that they have received explicit text messages, so sexting. So it's not just porn sites. Teenagers are sending naked pictures of each other, of themselves to each other. It's a thing. It's called sexting. And 60% of teens report that they have received that kind of text. 40% report that they have sent one. And it's really messed up and dark. And you think this is somewhere happening out there? Guys, it's not. It's everywhere. It's all around you. So when we talk about dangers of phones, of smartphones for kids, it's all here. It's all here. The final point here is how it remolds and reshapes kids' minds and brains. So I've already talked about the mental health issues with teens and social media. There's this really interesting observation that one of the guys says. There's a book out there called The Wolf in Their Pockets. And this guy has this really great analogy. He says, if you remember you were a teenager and you remember what it was like maybe walking down the hall in school. And when you're walking down the hallway was the place of where you were most insecure. The hallway was the place where everybody's sort of judging everybody, or everybody's performing. Everybody knows what kind of shoes you're wearing, what do you got, who your friends are. It's kind of the stressful place for teenagers in that season, right? When they're not kids anymore. Kids are so innocent, they just all play, elementary school. But then when they get into that teenage phase, they're all self-conscious. And the hallway was that place where you felt that pressure. So what he says is when we're giving all of our teenagers phones and social media, we're creating that life in that hallway all the time, that they can never escape it. Because if you're not there, then you're missing out on what everybody else is talking about. If you are there, you feel the pressure of performance and keeping up and being cool enough and getting as much affirmation as everybody else. That psychological pressure wears down on teenagers in ways that prevents them from just being normal teenagers and living their lives, right? So you have to think about not just even the places they visit, but when they're not on their phone, they're thinking about their phone. That's the other thing. It's not just the screen time. It's they're thinking about what they posted, what somebody else posted, or what somebody else said about somebody else, what somebody else said about them. All of that brain space is pushing down on them, and it's making them crazy. And no wonder, right? Again, that's why we shouldn't give it to them. If you look at the whole teenage transgender movement, all this craziness with just all these teenagers all of a sudden saying I'm this and that, and I'm a unicorn, and I'm cisgendered, whatever. Where's that all coming from? A lot of it is coming from online. You have isolated, lonely kids who find spaces online, and friends who start inviting them and connecting with them and feeding them these ideas. If it wasn't for social media, the whole transgender thing would not be nearly as much of a thing as it is now. My wife was just telling the story of just some Christian lady out in the community that she knows that she was just having a conversation like, yeah, my 15-year-old literally just started saying, out of nowhere, these are like church-going folks, like this guy, like healthy 15-year-old dude, he's like, life would just be so much easier if I was a girl. They're like, what, like, what are you talking about? Like, where is this going? And they start investigating, looking at his phone, looking at all these, there's a bunch of people, like communities that he started connecting with online. He started messing with his head. They took away his phone, took away everything back to normal. He's playing football now and being a boy. So, where do you get these ideas? You meet people who accept you, people who are like, it's okay, we love you, you're amazing. Be part of our community, we're gonna welcome you, right? My kids would never, ... If that's how you think, if you're like, oh, I know all that crazy stuff out there with those crazy parents and those crazy kids, but my kids would never, you are deluded. That's just how it is. When we're giving our kids a device with infinite access, we're giving them a loaded weapon. What are they going to do with it? What are the kids going to do with it? It's important that we are not naive. That's like the thing that we got to establish across the board. It's important that we are not naive. So, having established that, number 5, I would say, is in our homes, how do we move forward? I think that we have to start with creating a culture of discernment. We will never protect our kids from everything in the world. It's just impossible. If you think you're just going to unplug everything, take everything away, and protect them forever and shelter them, it's just not going to happen. We should protect them as much as we can, but we don't bank on that. We don't bank on protecting them and not preventing any of the darkness ever reaching our kids. Our kids need to be equipped. Our kids need to be taught. They need to be discipled. They need to know about sex. They need to know about pornography. They need to know about all these things that are in the world so that they're not surprised, so that when they hear about it from their peers at school, they can actually tell them even more than they know and guide them in a correct biblical perspective on it. If they are prepared, they are not surprised. If they are prepared, they know what they're seeing and they know where they need to look away and why it's so wrong. A lot of times, kids that are exposed, like, for example, to pornography, they don't even know what they're looking at. And then they're traumatized, and it's like a traumatic experience for them. It's something dirty and dark, and they don't even know what to do with it. Literally creates trauma for them. So we need to teach them. We need to equip them. We need to be alongside them, thinking through the world and facing the world together. Some people think if I just let my kid watch older cartoons, none of this new stuff, it's all messed up, all this new woke stuff, but the old stuff is good. You should sit down and watch some of that old stuff with them. Have we, there's a few cartoons that I turn on for my kids, like from the old days, from my kid, oh yeah, this is great. And you're just like, oh my gosh, we watched this? Like Home Alone? Has anybody watched Home Alone lately? The old ones. There's some really inappropriate stuff there, like stupid stuff. And stuff that would never make it today. Now, today we see some really crazy stuff, but it's crazy in a different way. Older does not mean better. There's a new cartoon on Disney called Bluey. It's like a little kids for like 3-year-olds. Such a great little cartoon. It's like all the Christian family values you can ever imagine. This beautiful Christian family. It's actually something that the transgender people really did not like about Disney. They were boycotting it because of that cartoon. It doesn't have any alternative, whatever's people's in there. So older doesn't mean better. We have to be discerning. We have to look, we have to engage, we have to listen, we have to look for good quality content. We have to be measured, but we can't be simplistic about it. I think it's important when we have healthy habits, we should be watching things and discussing things with our kids. It's not just like, oh my gosh, my kids are driving me nuts. I'm just going to let them watch cartoons and then I can go and breathe. That is a thing, of course, like especially small kids. Like it's true, right? We're not here to talk about like pie in the sky. We're here to talk about real solutions. But we should also explain to our kids, like, hey guys, like what is a good cartoon? Like some of these cartoons, like I was talking to my kids, like Masha and the Bear, like my opinion. If I offend you, sorry. I think it's one of the stupidest cartoons because there's no story. It's never going anywhere. It's just like crazy mayhem and destruction and just insanity. It's like, I don't know what they're on when they're writing that cartoon. It doesn't go anywhere. There's no story. There's just blinking lights and insanity and music and noise. And the kids are like, Or Grizzly and Lemmings. It's another one, same thing. I try to talk to my kids. I'm like, guys, I know you love that cartoon, but it's really dumb. There's no story. A good story has a plot. There's some meaning. There's a purpose. What is it teaching you? What are the ideas here? I'm trying to like educate them and engage them. What kind of books do they read? What kind of cartoon? Like so that they would be engaging in content with a mind that's critical, so that they would be like, this is dumb and boring. It's not even like it's bad. It's just really dumb, and this is not satisfying to me. We have to cultivate that kind of mindset that equips them to deal with the world correctly. If you enjoy trash, your kids will enjoy trash. So that's just like a thing. We can't be naive. We can't just be like, I just watch this stuff, but I would never want my kids to find out what I watch. If that's how you think, you lose already, right? And sometimes that when we think about we have to think about, okay, how can we, like, what is the point of watching something, a story, a movie, a cartoon? Like, this is not a sin. This could be used in a good way, this time together. And what kind of stories promote quality virtues, quality ideas? There's a podcast called Stories Are Soul Food. Such a great podcast for parents because it is a podcast with a Christian author. He writes books, fiction books, stories for kids. And the whole podcast is all about talking about just various kinds of books, various stories, various things that your kids can read, how you promote reading for your kids, how do you promote them to get interested in good stories. It's really fun and it's really interesting. And it helps you cultivate deeper taste. If I'm watching trash, I think the thing is I should ask myself is, why do I like this? And what do I need to do to change my tastes, to cultivate my tastes a little deeper? So cultivate a culture of discernment. I think that that's a big thing when we're coming to technology. You will never control everything your kids watch and everything they interact with, but they have to be dissatisfied in themselves eventually. Number 6, rules and limits. How do we talk about rules? Obviously, I think, as I was thinking about this, 90% of all of our struggles and all these conversations about technology is just this. What is the proper amount of screen time that I will allow in my home and in my life? That's really basically the whole question. What is the proper place? The couch belongs in the center of the living room, the dining table in the center. Everything has its place. Technology must occupy a proper place. If you can think carefully and identify what is the proper place of a TV, of the iPad, of video games in my home. If you find that proper place, you don't have to treat it like some guilty pleasure. You can enjoy it because it's not bad. It's not all bad, right? Because if we're creating a culture in our homes of just like, oh, no, everything is just bad, but fine, you can have some, it's not forming in them the healthy understanding of Christian liberty, right? When you think about God in the garden, God created a garden of yeses and one no. The world that God created was all about enjoyment and then some boundaries. And how we cultivate our kids with rules, it should not merely be a battle of like, oh, I need to turn this off. Oh my gosh, this is too much. It should be also a battle of, guys, this is how we enjoy. We can enjoy this much TV watching or this much video games, and that was so much fun. Now turn it off. Now we enjoy something else. Life should be about how we move intentionally forward into the things that we love and the things that we celebrate. For us with small kids, like the whole digital pacifier is real, right? It's just real. when little kids are driving you nuts and you can hand them a cartoon and they can just watch it over and over, Baby Shark or whatever, like, I don't know, it's something about it. It has a powerful thing. But for some people, if you're not thinking about it and your kids are driving you nuts all the time, it's something you go to all the time. You just stick it, you just give it, you give it. That is a terrible mistake, right? Because especially when we're talking about rules, and you start with little kids. Little kids need firm boundaries and no conversations about it. They need that. They need that for their brain. Of course, the little kid between, 0 to 3, 4, 5, they're going to do everything they can to break the fences. But little kids, they need structure. They need a daily structure, and they need limits. They need to know this is non-negotiable. So if I feel like I'm battling with my 3-year-old 10,000 times about why they can't watch cartoons, and I'm nailing it down, that's how it's supposed to be, right? If I'm always handing it, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. You're just there are days when you're about to lose your mind and you give them cartoons. That is understandable. It's going to happen, right? Let's not be unrealistic. But if that's your go-to, if that's how it is, your kid is learning a very chaotic life. Your kid is learning that at any moment, I can just get a screen and everything will be better. And that is a mistake. In that book that I read the quote, if you remember the quote that I read on Sunday about the baby looking for a face, Andy Crouch says this thing later in that chapter. He says, so that baby that's looking for a face, and there will come a day when that child is looking for a face and they will be handed a screen. And it's like, oh. And everything will be quiet and there will be peace, right? But at what cost? So, what kind of structure if you have little kids, if you are going to have little kids soon, what kind of structure do your little kids grow up in? Now, as the kids grow, and I'm speaking obviously not as somebody who has raised a bunch of kids, I'm speaking to you just as somebody who's thought about this and read people and listened to people who did raise kids. As the kids grow up, the rules should fall away gradually, right? You should not have more rules as they're getting older, more control. There should be less control, and as they're getting older and closer to teenage and adulthood, there should be less reliance on rules and more reliance on trust and discernment and personal drive for wisdom, right? So what happens is the opposite sometimes. We have no rules for the little kids, and they go crazy, and then they're reaching teenage, and they're going even crazier, and then parents start ratcheting in the rules. And that's going to create an explosion. It doesn't work. Once they're bigger, they're already got a different will, a different direction. That's backwards, right? So what we want to be going for, if you feel like for your little kids there's a lot of structure and there's a lot of rules and there's hard lines, that's how it should be. And as they're growing, we're removing those rules. We're giving them a little bit more freedom. They can go a little bit more. They can go online or read. And, I'd love to hear some of you guys who have preteens and teens and how you're doing that, because I know people are doing that. That's the trajectory we should be going for. My opinion, I don't know how softly I should say this, like when you think about all of the damage, all of the danger, and all of the risk, I don't think that there's a reason to have a smartphone before you're 16, and if you can't pay for it yourself. I didn't have a phone until I could pay for it, and I think that was great, because I had to be old enough to have a job to be able to pay for my phone bills, and it gave it long enough time. Now, I don't know what your family is going to decide about what age you start that at, but the longer you delay it, the more time you give them to form, to not live in that hallway in front of everybody, to not live perpetually connected. And it's not just social media. You might be like, well, my kids don't have Instagram. Every app is social media these days. YouTube is a form of social media. Video games are a form of social media because people can connect. Even just messaging, just kids messaging and texting, just sending text messages, they can be stuck in that vortex all day long of just messaging each other and not break out in their brains to just be humans. So that's my thought. I'll plant that flag, and you can come at me if you want. Rules, yes. And again, I would love to hear more from you guys later. Number 7, boredom. What do we do with boredom? Because that's the big thing. Summer's coming up, right? Oh, I'm bored. It's one of the most terrible and annoying things as parents that we hear. What do you do with that? Actually, it's healthy for them to be bored. It is not our job as parents to entertain our kids all the time. It is not our job to solve their boredom problem. If you are solving, the more you try to entertain your kids, the more bored they will become because they don't develop the ability to be creative, to think of something to do, to go outside. As I was working on this week, I was at home hanging out with Charlie. He asked me for candy and for cartoons probably 20 times the same morning. It's just his routine. Can I have a candy? Can I have vitamins? Because it's a form of candy. Can I have applesauce? Can I watch? Can I look at pictures? And it's like, it's not like we let him look at the phone and pictures all the time, but this is his thing. He's just nailing this button all day long. And I'm just like, no. And he's like, just all over me. My position is, I will not give in. No. It may sound, from the side, it may look like I'm ignoring my kid. I'm not ignoring my kid. I'm making a line. I'm not going to, what happens 10 minutes later? I look outside, he's just riding around on the four-wheeler and climbing out, jumping on the trampoline, having a great time. It always happens. He's cartoons, candy, chicken nuggets, cartoons, candy. This is all morning long, and then all of a sudden, everything's super quiet. I'm like, where is he? And I just look over, and he's just sitting on the couch, looking at a book. Now, you may walk in and be like, oh, your 3-year-old looks at books? What do you? It's like, yeah, but actually, you had to get there. You just have to draw a line. I'm not going to be the one who entertains your boredom. And the kid has to learn to break through their own boredom. And they do. That's how they create the ability to play. That magical state when they're just in their world playing and they forget everything else. How do they enter that magic? They have to battle through their boredom, and you can't do it for them. That's why a lot of times it's like, he's so annoying me. Okay, fine, you can watch cartoons. That literally just disrupted his battle with his own creativity to break out and to do something quality. It's crazy because I think this is a bigger problem with boys in the neighborhood, at least in my experience. Nathan goes outside. We're just like, Nathan, go play. And the boys in the neighborhood, you could see most kids, most of the boys that we have around our house, they have constant access to video games because what happens? They come outside, they last 20 minutes. They're just like, they try to throw a baseball, and they're just like, okay, we're going to go inside and play video games. And we have a rule that our kids are not allowed to go inside the homes of anybody. They can play in the backyard or the front yard. They can't go inside. Why? Because why do they go inside? Because they go play video games. These boys, because the idea of video games is always hanging there in the back of his mind, they never really learn to play. They never really learn to play. They get bored, they go to video games. They try to play a game, video games. Their mind is not cultivating creativity, problem solving, and that's really important for the future. Something that I would also just plug in here, I don't know what your policies are. Everybody's got a DVD player in their car these days. I think that same thing applies here, right? Like, you don't need to turn on a cartoon every time you're driving. Actually, like, you're in a box together as a family, and it's a time where you can have conversations. In our previous minivan, we just said the DVD player's broken because we couldn't figure out how to use it, and it was just like a thing. Like, it's there, but they don't even realize it's there because we've never used it. Now we got this nice van from Zeka, and the DVD player works really well. But again, for us, like, we just set a rule. We're like, guys, we're not using it. And they stopped asking because they don't remember that it's there. We've pulled it out on a super long road trip. On the second half of the road trip, when they're about to go crazy, we can turn on a cartoon. That's fine. But most of the time you drive, kids, they'll talk to each other. They'll look out the window. They have to learn that. And again, some kids are tougher than others. I know some people have kids who are just terrors in the car seat, But is the cartoon every time the answer? I don't know. I would push back against that. So, finally, what are the rules like in our house? Again, we are not perfect. We struggle and we're trying to figure this out just like everyone else, and we are not consistent all the time. But generally speaking, our kids don't use or touch any screens that are except a TV. So they can never touch the iPad. They can never touch any of our phones. That's just a rule. At first, it's a little battle, but now they know, and so they never ask. If they never see the iPad and they never see my phone, or they know they're not allowed to touch it or play with it, there's a passcode, it's just not even an option, then they never ask, right? It just becomes a category in their brain. So the only screen that they engage with is the TV. We let them watch usually about like only 3 times a week. And it's like specific nights. So, when we have group, we have our young couples group. That's one of the only nights they can watch TV. So they're watching cartoons. I'll pick something for them. Or like Friday night is like a family movie night. But it's specific times, and it's scheduled. It's not like at any point that we can just turn it on. Some people may think that's too much. Push back. We can talk. But they know, and when they know what the pattern is, then they don't always question it. And I also try to just talk to them. What are we watching? Why is it good? Why is it bad? Have a conversation. No screens at the table. Again, we're not perfect. Sometimes we have our phones when we're eating dinner or eating breakfast. But generally, I think we've been getting pretty good at that. And just have a conversation. How's it going? Let's ask an intentional question. Again, this is like, as a dad, I don't know what, sometimes as most of us dads, I think we're a lot less intentional. You just get there, breakfast, and your wife has created this beautiful Saturday morning breakfast, and you're just like, sit down, you expect everything, and then my wife is asking all these great questions to my kids, and I'm just like, okay, I need to kick into gear here, get some coffee, wake up, ask some good questions, let's have a good conversation. So that's kind of how we do things. Couple questions for us. We're going to take a couple minutes break here, and I just want to pass the mic around, and we can talk. What have been the biggest challenges for you guys? What are the biggest challenges? What are the biggest wins? What are you learning from each other? What are we learning from each other? What's working? What's not working? What has been some of the most difficult pushbacks or frustrations when you're trying to set rules with your kids? What are the moments, I think all of us have this, right? Where you're not quite sure, okay, am I being too hard on this or am I not? What about video games? Should we completely not have them? Should we have them a little bit? I don't know. So, would love to hear your thoughts. Let's take 5 minutes. Let's put a timer up there. Grab some more tea, coffee, and we'll be right back.